Welcome to the Put On Waivers Media Group, home of the Put On Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
Welcome, everybody, to the glorious episode of the Put On Raiders podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, along with Ryan Holmes, and we are podcasting at the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day out here in Southern California. Let's just get right to it. It's kind of a shorter show, but we're just going to kind of go over some draft prospects, here, because that's what we do with Raider Nation in February and January. We talk about draft prospects because we ain't playing right now. So, yeah, a couple guys that you kind of talked about this week. And you kind of on your Twitter, which is RHOLM22. Give me some. We'll start with Paris Johnson here. What are your thoughts about him?
I've heard a lot about Paris Johnson. So when I threw on the all 22, what I was expecting to see, I didn't see. I'm not a huge believer. I think there's a lot of upside in Paris Johnson. I don't think he's ready to be a day one starter at left tackle, plug him in 10 years. I saw a guy that needs a lot of work on his technique. The obvious things that stand out right away, he's tall, he's long, he's athletic, he moves fairly well. He had some good snaps as a run blocker where you saw him pancake some guys. If he can get onto guys, he can be a really effective run blocker. But the more I watched him pass block, and most of these prospects, I'll watch a game or two and have a pretty good opinion. I had to find a third game of Paris Johnson just to make sure what I was seeing was really what I was seeing. And the first thing that stood out is functional strength. Like for a guy his size, I saw a lot of smaller defensive ends getting inside underneath his pads and just driving him backwards. And I didn't see him really anchor into the ground and stop those bull rushes. And that's a huge concern for me because this is happening with guys that he has 50, 60, 70 pounds on. So he needs to add functional strength, which you can do. Colton Miller had that issue and he added functional strength. But the inconsistent hand placement was the biggest thing for me. A lot of times he was getting his hands outside guys. He basically get him in a chokehold when they were trying to run around him. And he was just really sloppy with consistently timing his punch and getting his hands where he could control the blocker. And I don't want to put this out there in the universe. It's not as bad as Alex Leatherwood is a rookie with the Raiders, but it wasn't much better. There was a lot of times where I was expecting him to call for a hold. He wasn't. They helped him a lot. When I threw on the tape, the left guard would always slide over and help him. They would move tight ends over there. They'd have running backs chipping. So I understand the intrigue with a guy that big that moves that well, but the technique, the hand placement, the fact they helped them so much in the Big Ten where there's not a lot of elite pass rushers left a lot more red flags for me than there wasn't. So I like him. I'm not taking him in the top 15.
Yeah. So he's receiving that much help. It was noticeable that he was feeling that he was getting that much help.
A lot. And I watched the Notre Dame game,
that's not good.
The Iowa game, and the Penn State game. So it's not Foskey's a good prospect, but Van Ness was lined up against him a couple times against Iowa, but for the most part, he lined up a defensive tackle. And then I don't know who the guy was from Penn State, but he gave him fits at times. But there were great flashes. You turn on that, there's 5, 6, 7 plays a game where you get it, but there was so much inconsistency, which for a guy that you're talking about in the top 10, top 12 of the draft, I just don't see it.
Was he a finisher?
Maybe I'm wrong.
Was he a finisher? Was he?
Yeah, when he got his hands on guys,
yeah,
especially in the run game, he could put him in the ground.
Okay.
There was a lot of times where rushers would come over his left side, and instead of sliding over and getting in front of him, he had such long arms, he would just wrap him up and fall on top of him, and he wouldn't get a holding call called. He would just grab him and jump on top of him, which that's not going to work in the NFL.
Yeah. Okay.
He's going to take time. He might be good 2 or 3 years from now, but he's not ready to step in and be a dominant guy year one.
No, that's not a day one starter, as they say, right?
Whoever takes him is going to make him as a day one starter. He's not going to step in and have no issues. There's going to be some holding issues. He's going to get beat. He's just going to take time.
Okay. And what about the kid from Northwestern?
I like this kid, Peter Skoronsky.
I can tell you.
The film's really good. This guy's the opposite. He's a technician, gets his hands in the right place all the time. He's really good in the run game. He slides really well in pass protection. He showed multiple pass sets. You'd see like a vertical set, then a jump set. He anchored for a guy. Like he was able to get his lower half, get into his legs, and stop bull rushes. And the biggest thing for me is he's versatile. Like this guy's probably not an elite left tackle. The length is the issue here. He has 32-inch arms.
Mhm.
And I went back and tried to see over the last, I think I went back like 2015, like who's been a really good left tackle with short arms. Like Rashawn Slater, also of Northwestern, has 33-inch arms. Most of them, the Caleb McGarry's with Atlanta, Sam Cosme, that was at Texas. He went over to the Commanders. There was like a couple other guys. I put out 4 examples. They all moved to right tackle. So like these guys didn't stay. And now we're talking about taking a guy, if he goes in the top 10 and you move him to right tackle, you know, it's not a natural position for him. I think he could be a Pro Bowl left guard. Like if you just move this guy inside the left guard, like he shows power in the run game. He's a really good pass blocker. He has great technique, really good hand placement, good lower half. If you put this guy next to Colton Miller, like you're not going to have to worry about the left side of your line for a long time. Now the issue is the value is not there to take a guard
that early.
It's 7. You just don't do it. This isn't Quentin Nelson. He's not that kind of run blocker.
Yeah.
But he's a really good player that's going to be a day one starter and is going to play at a really good level right out of it. You know, it's just open up the box, put him in the lineup. He's good to go. He's a 10-year starter, no questions asked. So this might be a player that appeals to this new regime because of how they did the offensive line, where we're just going to move 5 guys around until we figure out what we want. Like this is the guy that you can put him wherever you need him. Like if you want him at right tackle, fine. You need him at right guard, good. Left guard, good. Whoever takes him is going to start him out at left tackle if they need a left tackle. The Raiders don't need a left tackle, so I don't see that as an option. And I don't think moving Colton Miller to the right tackle is a good idea either. Like he's entrenched at left tackle. He's one of the top 5, 6 left tackles in the NFL. Like you don't need to move him. So this guy's the polar opposite of what he's really safe. He's not Paris Johnson. He doesn't have that kind of upside, but he's ready to go right now, and you know what you're getting. There's no projection in this player's role. Like plug him in, let him go.
Yeah. You heard that Raider Spaces. Who want to move Colton Miller to right tackle every day? Let's just leave Colton alone. We got enough issues without moving Colton Miller all around as far as that goes. Thank you for that one.
If the Raiders are picking 15 to 17 and this guy was on the board, absolutely slam dunk.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's going to get there. This is not a very good offensive line draft at the top of the draft. This is the best, cleanest offensive lineman in the draft. Someone's taking this guy fairly early.
Yeah, especially with how offensive line play has been around the National Football League this year. Going to start off with Jordan Addison from USC is one of my guys. You had 2 guys, right? Yeah, you had 2 guys.
Yeah,
that's
just
fine.
those 2 this week.
That's fine. Jordan Addison. I just obviously this channel we do USC football as well. Very, very similar to Calvin Ridley, can do all the things you want in the passing game. Even will block a little bit for you, but tunnel screens, can get deep. I think the one thing that I did appreciate about him was when they had their worst offensive output in the season, the game at Oregon State, he was there with the big play, almost a walk-off touchdown. Late in that ball game, they go play the rivalry game against UCLA. He has a huge game against UCLA. Like, I mean, every time they played a big game, like it wasn't like you had to go search out where he was. They found him. Now they didn't. I mean, we were around when they were playing Utah a second time. I mean, they could have probably found him a little bit more in that game against Utah. But he shows up. He shows up, and I think he can do. He can do whatever you want. I think he's the best wide receiver in this draft. I know people talk about the kid from TCU, but I do think it's from a pure pass catcher, running routes, everything like that. A little bit of a long strider. Once it takes him that first couple steps to get down the field, but once he gets down the field, especially you can see it on some of the tunnel screens, bubble screens that USC ran. You're not gonna have any problems with him at all. I mean, he's phenomenal as far as that goes. So I definitely would continue to tout him as being a number one receiver in the draft. Andrew Voorhees, I saw a lot of people picking him for the Raiders at like the second or third round for a guard. He is a very talented guard. He holds up again in the pass game. When he got hurt, it changed the whole dynamic of the USC offensive line. He's good in the run game. He's always looking for somebody to hit. He is can kind of hold the pocket, especially if the Raiders do go on and maybe get a quarterback who moves around a little bit. Caleb Williams does that. It's a whole different, kind of blocking sense where you have to block for a guy who's a statue opposed to a guy who might extend the play. So I like Andrew Voorhees a lot, and obviously not in the first round, like you mentioned the guard situation. Guard second round, third round, he could be a possible pick for a team or the Raiders as well. Last guy would be linebacker Trenton Simpson. He can do a lot of different things. He is a very active linebacker. He can rush the passer. He can bat passes down. He can set the edge. He's a sure tackler. I think one of the things I did like about him was a couple of times when I watched the film, they're blitzing, they're playing zone. He's able to drop into his zone, take away crossers, take away hots from the opposing quarterback. So it allowed other players on his team to go ahead and get sacks. So he's a very talented player. I know that's people have him in the top 10. I'm not sure if that's, and I'm not sure if he's that kind of linebacker, but I do think he is put in the right situation. Obviously, anybody can do well, but I do like him a lot. He's very active. He's everywhere on the football field when you watch Clemson play football.
Yeah, good blitzer. My concern would be he's not going to dominate in the run game as a linebacker. He's more of a blitzer, passing defense guy. So like probably mid to late first round would be probably where I like him a lot. I watched some Clemson tape. Miles Murphy, we can talk about on another podcast, but I will not be mocking him to the Raiders. I'll explain that later. Yeah. But essentially, I do have a disclaimer for Raider fans because I see a lot of them they'll message me and just say, we just need to draft all defense. And you have the anti-quarterback group. So for me, having looked at probably 5 or 6 of these guys that are somewhere between 5 and 15 in the draft, I've seen a good number of these. This is the issue the Raiders are going to run into. If they don't want to take a quarterback and they don't want to take one of these 2 offensive linemen, there is no other defensive lineman that I would take there. There's not a defensive tackle. There's not an edge. There's not a pure linebacker. There's not a safety. So it's going to be a corner or one of these 2 linemen if the Raiders don't take a quarterback. So to me, I would take the best player on the board regardless of position. And if that's an offensive lineman, so be it. I wouldn't force myself to take a defender because there isn't going to be a defender. There's a big drop off after Anderson, Carter, and let's say the next guy for me is probably Tyree Wilson. He would be in the mix there at 7 if you want to take that edge player, but some of these mocks have him going 5 or 6 to Seattle or Detroit. So after those 3, take the best corner on the board or take the best offensive lineman, because I don't really see a guy that's going to have the impact as of now. It's going to change as I see more of these guys. Like I said, I've only seen probably 5 or 6. But the guys I've seen that are in the range, you see them out to the Raiders, I have a lot of questions on some of them, particularly Miles Murphy, but we'll save that one for another podcast.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, so yeah, it could kind of a peak. You want some more stuff you can watch later on. I'll be doing some stuff. Ryan will get to some stuff when he can on Twitter. So I just want to give you guys a little taste of some of the prospects who are coming out in this year's draft, since we're past the part where they can declare and make themselves available. I will say this: I did watch a little Ohio State, and I didn't dive totally into CJ Stroud. And I kind of look at some of the incompletions more so than the completions to see whether or not, because some incompletions can be really impressive as well. The accuracy is nice. It's nice on CJ Stroud. So we'll see. We'll dive in. I'll dive in deeper, but so far so good as far as that goes. We'll see. We'll see if the Raiders do something like that, or if he ends up being a Panther or something else.
Definitely.
Cool. All right, Ray Nation. Take care. Peace.